So recording is here. Anyone that is asking questions is obviously consenting to have their questions recorded because obviously this has been recorded and other people will be listening to the training and potentially excerpts of it will also be posted to different places. So we're on week 2 of the outline training, so going over the different property strategies. So last week it was the overall view of different strategies and why invest in property as compared to other assets like stocks and shares, crypto and different things. So today we're looking at BRRR, and you might have noticed I've actually put an extra R on there. So it's BRRRR. Some people talk about BRR. Some people talk about the 3 Rs. And I'm going to be talking about the 4 Rs. So I'm just checking if some people joined and I need to admit them to the room. Just a second, please. No, I think we're okay. Let's go back to the presentation. Yes. So the extra R is actually very important, and that is repeat. Because if we do something once, we've got some return on our investment and we've like made a start in getting into property. But if we're not doing it with the aim of repeating and almost, I'm going to say, aggressively growing the portfolio, growing our income, we're going to be like getting something. Whereas in reality, if we put our mind to it, we can get a lot more, and that's the aim of the this strategy. So here we've got the 4 Rs. So the first of all, the B is to buy a property. Then it's to renovate it, rent it out to get the ongoing income. Generally, when we bought and renovated, the key part of the strategy is to be able to buy in such a way. So generally, we're buying at a low price, so below market value. We're buying something that needs typically quite a lot of work on it, so that when we do the work on it, the renovation, we've added more value than the simple fact of the amount that we paid to buy it and the amount that we paid to renovate it, so that when we get to the refinance, we've got a ideally considerably higher value of the property. And when we go to the bank to lend on the end value, the aim is to get most or all of the money out so we can get to the next stage, which is repeat. And the other way of talking about this, and is a term that I like to use, is called momentum investing. Because momentum is when we start doing something and we start like a train when it's starting to move, it's really, really heavy. It's moving slowly at the beginning, but as we put more power onto it, as we keep on doing and focusing on the strategy, then we're rapidly growing. And because if the aim isn't immediately to take money, take the investment returns, and we're reinvesting everything, we're getting money from the refinance. So when we refinance, we're getting money back out of the project. We're getting rental income. And it's true that the rental income isn't going to be enough money to be able to buy another house after a few months. But when we've got to a few properties, a few houses, if we're holding the rental income and accumulating it, in reality, if we've got maybe 5 or 6 houses, that is enough to get a new deposit typically every year. So by combining everything together, having the momentum, we're able to rapidly grow our capacity for generating ongoing income. So we've got the buy, renovate, rent, refinance. And also an important thing, we're going to be mentioning this in a little while. We all know that, well, we all know, or maybe you don't know, if you're buying a house like a buy-to-let house, there's typically 2 to 3 months, sometimes longer, between the moment that we have an offer accepted by the person that's selling and we actually get the keys to the property. It can be 2 to 3 months because of delays in like doing surveys, conveyancing, everything between the solicitors. It's not going generally very fast. So if we're talking about repeat, if in reality we wait on the first one until we've got all the refinance and we've got the money back, got some of our money out and we're ready to go again, if then we start looking for the next one and start putting an offer in and going through conveyancing, we've lost in reality maybe 2, 3, 4 months on the momentum. So to have that in mind, that as soon as we've got the first one or the second one, when we know that we're going to be like 2, 3 months to being able to get the money back out or some of the money back out of it, start looking for the next one so that we're ready. We don't have to have the money back from the refinance to be able to put an offer in to buy the next one. We can get, it's not difficult to get a decision in principle on the refinance well before we actually get ready to do it, and we can use that decision in principle. Maybe we've still got some savings in a bank account that we can use, and we can use that as proof of deposit for looking for the next one. So that's the BRRR 4Rs. There's obviously a lot of details to it and a lot of things that we can go to in more depth, and there will in fact be a more complete training module. It's basically a full day's training on the BRRRR strategy. But let's move on to the next slide. So we've got an either or here. So either we're doing like typical, more traditional buy-to-let investment. So we've got some money available to put as a deposit for buying a buy-to-let investment, basically buying a house to rent out to a family, for example. The person will go on the look on Rightmove or Zoopla, look for a property that maybe we'll find something that's a little bit below market value, or we're happy to buy at market value. Looking for a property where someone can immediately put a tenant in there, start getting some rental income. That's fine. It's a good investment. It's better than leaving the money in the bank, and I would say better than buying stocks and shares. However, once that deposit is in the property, you're getting the rental income, but you can't get that money back out. Well, maybe not for quite a long time. It's true, when we buy a property, we're buying it for the property prices increasing. So we've got what we call the capital appreciation, but it might be 4, 5, 6 years before the price has increased sufficiently for us to be able to refinance and buy something else. So if we're doing this first strategy, we're basically waiting until from our ongoing income from something else, maybe work income, maybe business income, we're waiting until we've got again enough money to buy another, basically another house. The or, which is the BRRRR strategy, is to find something that's at a low price, typically because there's quite a lot of work to do on it, a lot of renovation. So we're buying at a low price. We're looking at something where we can add value. Generally, we're looking to add more value than the cost of doing the work. A simple thing can be taking a 2-bedroom house and where one of the bedrooms is maybe quite big, converting it into a 3-bedroom house. And we might already add, by doing that, maybe between 10 and 30,000, depending on where in the country the house is. Whereas the cost of adding a bedroom, it's basically making a stud wall between inside a big bedroom, adding a radiator, doing a bit of electrics, bit of decoration, which we might have planned to do anyway. It's going to cost us maybe £4,000 or £5,000 to get at least twice that much increase in value. And we'll see there are different ways of adding value. And so by following this strategy, buying low, adding value, and then within, typically it's 6 months from buying, because most lenders will only allow refinance on a property 6 months after buying it. There are a few exceptions, but not that many. The idea is that within 6 months, we're able to get most of our money, or a good amount of our money, out, and be able to go on to the next one. I'll pause for a moment and open for any questions that anyone has at this stage before we continue into a little more details. Right, no questions. Let's get on to the next slide. So step one is buying the house, finding the property. So we're looking to buy below market value, and with the possibility, with the strategy, to add value to the property. And we're looking obviously to add more value than the actual cost of doing the work. And some ways of doing it, like I already mentioned, can be adding a bedroom. It could be also, sometimes if we're looking to do shared houses, we might have got a couple of reception rooms on the ground floor, or a very large reception room, and we've got windows at both the front and the back. And in that case, we can create an additional bedroom, for example, on the ground floor. So sometimes we can take a 2-bedroom house and make it into a 4-bedroom shared house. And that is adding a lot of value. And when we're doing things like that, we are able to get typically all of our money out. Because by doing like a basic thing like adding 1 bedroom or doing a general renovation, occasionally we can get all our money out, but more often we left some of the money in, but with the ongoing rental income, we're quite close to getting most of it out. And if we've got a bit of extra income saved up somewhere, we're able to get on more or less straight away to the second property, and then the next ones. Sometimes as well, we'll see that a little bit later, where we can either buy and pay the full price, so use all the money to without using finance to buy the first one. Or if we had enough money, for example, to buy 1 complete house and renovate it, maybe we'll decide to use finance and buy 2 houses, because if we get 2 at the beginning, then for sure when we get our money out, we've immediately got enough to get the third one, and we've got 2 times the ongoing cash flow, the ongoing rental income. And in not exactly no time, but in a few months, we're going to definitely be at the situation where we can buy the 3rd one and get the momentum going, and then get the 4th one. So we said about adding a bedroom, we can add a toilet or bathroom. If you've got a large bedroom, we can potentially create a ensuite shower room and toilet. That's going to add value to the property. And then there are some things that we can do which will give maybe a big increase in the attractiveness of the property to get a better valuation, that don't cost maybe a massive amount of money. One example is doing things like a media wall. We've got maybe £500 worth of carpentry to do something that looks nice. but we've added maybe a like sort of wow factor onto the property, and we're getting a higher end value. So these are some of the ideas on the buy part. Buy at low value, below market value, and add value so we can get an end value higher than the money that we put in. Next part about
Sorry, Tom, I have
buying.
a question on the slide you've just left.
Yeah,
So yeah, two questions actually. First one is, so in terms of adding the value, I think the first thing you had there was adding the bedroom. So I'm assuming this could be probably through extensions and things like that, right? Extending the property if there's that opportunity, or is that separate something you're going to cover later on as your
right. So it depends where it is. If we're in Croydon or London, because of the price per square meter
Hmm,
on a property, can be worth doing extensions. It can be worth, for example, in these areas, if we can get either do under permitted development or with planning permission, create, for example, an attic room. Because an attic room, it might cost 20, 30,000 to do.
yeah,
But if doing that is going to add maybe 20 square meters to the property and add 50 or 60,000 pounds to the value of the property, that's fine. We've doubled the money that we put in. However, if we're in South Wales, where we can buy a house at £100,000, and the added value of an attic room might be 10 or 15,000 pounds, it makes no sense to spend 30,000 to do it, because we're like sort of throwing money away.
yeah.
And so the same thing is like, yeah, creating an extension to maybe make an additional room, make the lounge, or make a kitchen, a bigger kitchen. If property prices are high, if we're like at £8,000 per square meter property prices, it makes sense, because we perhaps got a build cost of 2.5 to £3,000 per square meter. So we've added value. But if we've got property prices that are 1,000, 1,500 per square meter, then we can only consider doing things within the existing limits of the house. So if we've got a big bedroom, we can create either make it into two bedrooms or create the ensuite in there. Yeah, so depending where it is. And in fact, if we're in areas where the price of properties are higher, in reality, to make them worth it, we have to have strategies to add significant value. And in London, for example, or around London, it's rare that we can do a BRRR and get our money out by simply adding a bedroom or doing something like that. Generally, there we need to have a bit more meat in the project and go for things like converting a house into a HMO. One thing that does work in London is buying like a large terraced house where we can make it into a 6 or 7 bedroom HMO, because then we're getting the end value based on a commercial valuation, and we can add sufficient value so that then we can get all our money out. Because there it's because of the property prices in London, it makes sense if we can put money in, add value, and get all the money out, because then we've got a asset which we haven't got any of our money tied up in it. We probably got quite a high interest payments on the mortgage. The rental income will obviously, it has to cover the mortgage payments. In fact, we wouldn't get the lending anyway, because that's one of the things that lenders check. But even if we've got a cash flow which is maybe just a few £100 per month, as long as we've got all our money out and we've got an asset which in 5 years' time might be worth 100 or 200,000 pounds more, we're happy to have the smaller cash flow, because we've got the capital appreciation, we haven't got our money tied up. So yeah, depending on the areas, different types of deal. We have to do, yeah, different types of deal to be able to uh to get the money out. Obviously, there's other strategies that we will cover, which are like variations of BRRR, things like doing title splits, buying things that have got a short lease, and then dealing with the lease extensions, and then selling. Those are other ways of adding sufficient value to be able to. That's not necessarily, for example, doing a lease extension. That's actually quite nice because you can sit at home and you can do that on paper. You haven't even got to go and get a decorator in to paint the property. Well, you might want to do that as well, but you can get sufficient uh, uplift in the value to be able to get typically all the money out, and potentially if the asset is a good asset to keep because you've got capital appreciation, get a tenant in there, get your ongoing small amount of cash flow, but you've almost like got a free property that is increasing in value. I think you had a second question as well, didn't you, Sam?
Yeah, it kind of ties in with this one. So I think, what you did say, based on obviously what you just explained in terms of depending on the area, then obviously you do the relevant, I suppose, renovations to kind of add value. Is there any, in your experience, is there any kind of guidelines or I suppose a ratio of the cost of renovation and adding value? What is the what is the good ratio to look out for? What is the, for example, if is it 1 to 2, you add, say for example, it costs you, X amount to renovate, but then the added value is 2 times X, right? Is there a ratio, or is there a number that you'd use to guide
It's
that?
more a question, it's not really a ratio as such,
Hmm,
because everyone can be a bit different. It's more a question of plugging the figures, and I've got templates that we use for that.
okay.
More a question of putting the numbers there and seeing what it comes out at. And yeah, generally like getting after a bit of time you have a feel for things. You look at something, you think, um because if you've got something that's like 20% below market value and you can add 10-15% by like this, adding a bedroom, for example, then potentially, because in reality, when you refinance, you're refinancing at 75%.
Mhm.
So that means if to get all your money out, you need to add 25% value on top of your purchase price and your cost of renovation.
Yeah.
So if, for example, let's say you got an end value of 130,000, something like 75% of 130,000 is going to be like 100,000. So in order to get all your money out of a property that's got an end value of 130,000, you shouldn't be putting more than 100,000 into it. So let's say you're buying at 80,000 and renovating at 20,000, then you're just about okay.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's quite a lot, we'll look at this in an example, but there's quite a lot of things we have to factor in for costs. Obviously, if we're borrowing at the beginning and we're refinancing at the end, we've got two sets of finance costs. And when we're doing that, we're not going to be able to get all our money out. But
Mm.
it's still, you were using the bank lending like we looked at last week as leverage. So we're still okay if maybe we've left 10, 15K in the deal. And the other thing as well is if you're doing everything yourself, like I was doing at the beginning, I was like finding property myself, project managing the renovations, then it's getting closer to be able to get all the money out. If you don't have the time to do that, and so you're using, for example, someone like me to help find the property, obviously there's a fee for that. And then to look after the renovation, there's obviously project management charges and things like that. When it's like that, you're not going to be able to get all the money out, but obviously you're paying someone to basically to do that. and
Mm.
you're using some of your ongoing income from, let's say, your day job to be able to do that. Because if you were to stop your work and spend time going around looking at properties, going around organizing builders, shouting at them, and dealing with all that sort of stuff, and lots of time maybe finding the right brokers and things, then you're not going to be getting the money from your day job. So it's a choice. Some people, like who are following the education, are doing it with the aim of getting full time into property. So there may be the first project they'll do with someone like myself who will find the property, will manage the renovation, but at the same time they'll be like sort of looking closely at how we're doing it, with the aim that because they've got time to then go and do it fully themselves the second time, and then really accelerate what they're doing. Right, let's move on to the next slides. We'll have a bit more time for questions in a moment. So next part of the buying, there are some people that will maybe buy things in all sorts of different areas in the country. What generally we recommend is to choose an area and get to know it. So maybe spend a bit of time either yourself or like with the help of some people that can explain a bit what they've done themselves. Choose the area that you want to invest in, get to know a bit the market, property values, rental income, go and like visit the area, get a feel for things, rather than look one day at something that's up in Newcastle, then the next day look in Liverpool, and then the third day look in South Wales. Get an idea of sort of where you want to go. And also at the same time, one thing that we talk about when we're talking about mindset, it's don't take 3 years to decide where you're going to start. If you're ready to start, then look at maybe choose two or three areas, go and visit them and decide, look, I'm going to start in this particular area and start doing it. To give like a little example from on my side, when I started investing, I decided I was going to start buying property and start basically doing the momentum stuff around 6 or 7 years ago. I went and spent a couple of days up in the Newcastle, Sunderland area. I spent a couple of days in South Wales. Both of these, by the way, with people that were doing sourcing. So I went with people that were showing me a number of different properties, showing me some of the things that they'd already done. And in the end, for various reasons, I chose South Wales. I did work with the source at the beginning. There was a sourcer that found the first property because I wanted like a bit more, yeah, a bit of help getting onto the first one. And then I project managed the renovation. And then from then on, because my objective was to stop working and get full time into property, then I was looking at finding all the other ones myself and like doing a few rent to rent deals and all the standard stuff. Yeah, so in buying, decide on an area and go for it, basically. And then the other thing to consider also is what you're going to be doing with the properties. So we've got some examples here. We can be doing standard buy to let, so standard rentals to an individual or a family. Social housing. Social housing can be different things. It can be renting. Typically, social housing is renting the house out on a 3 or a 5 year lease to a social provider who might be looking after dealing with asylum seekers. It could be local housing authority who are renting for 5 years, for example, for homeless people. Or a third one that is quite popular is charities or organizations that are renting to house ex-offenders. So those are the different things on social housing. Supported living is a bit different. Supported living is accommodating. Again, it's also going to be on a 3 or 5 year lease. But this is different in the sense that it's housing people that need like permanent care. And typically there's going to be a room in the house for or possibly 2 rooms in the house that are used by the people that need the ongoing care. And then 1 or 2 rooms for the carers, like the rotation of carers. So these second options, it's guaranteed income and generally also all the maintenance is inside the house is being looked after. And then we've got the options which generally give higher returns but are more management intensive. And it gives the higher returns when you're managing it yourself. If you're putting it under management, there'll probably be still high returns, but nowhere near as what you would get if you're managing it yourself. Because, for example, serviced accommodation, I've got my own serviced accommodation units, and we manage them for investors who we've found and renovated houses, and we're looking after them. The investors are still making, on average, more money than on a standard buy-to-let, but obviously there's management fees. Typically, it's around 15%. So, but it can still be a good deal. And the same with HMOs, houses in multiple occupation shared houses, generally considerably higher income than standard rental. So depending on what you're going to be doing with the house, there are specific requirements for specifically for social housing, supported living, and HMOs. There are specific standards that have to be met. So extra costs in the renovation, and the house also has to have like some of the specific requirements, but we haven't got time to go into more detail on that now. That'll be obviously in the full course. More things about the buy stage, how to buy. So estate agents, we can get good deals through estate agents. It's always needed to put in an offer. Offer can be considerably lower than the asking price. Just as an aside, we talk about buying below market value. Market value is not the price at which an estate agent is listing a property. You probably know that generally estate agents want to get business from customers that are want to sell their house. To get the business from that customer, they're going to say, give the highest price to the person selling, say, we can get X amount, knowing in general that X amount is going to be higher than the market value, higher than someone's going to pay. And a few months later, they're going to say, look, sorry, we haven't got anyone wants to buy that price. Let's make it lower, because they've already got the business. So there's generally a lot of room for maneuver when putting an offer in via an estate agent. We've got buying in auction. Advantage of buying in auction is 28-day completion. So if you've got the finances ready, either the full cash to be able to buy the property, or we've got the decision in principle on the lending. There are specialist lenders who lend for auctions and can complete the lending well within the 28 days. Big advantage there is we've got something ready to go in 28 days from the auction. And then we've got 2, in reality, quite contrasting possibilities. Using a deal sourcer, there's obviously a charge for that, but it's hands off. And if you're using someone that's got experience and is trustworthy, it's a good way of at least getting fast the first property. And then there's a complete contrast, which we call direct to vendor, which is like going around looking for houses, trying to find out who owns a house that maybe like looks dilapidated, going on to land registry, seeing, writing a letter, putting leaflets through doors and different things like that. Obviously, very high in basically the time cost, but possibility of getting some really good deals and not, if you're doing it yourself, not paying the sourcing fee. Direct to vendor can also be through network. It can be if you're like, well, for me, because I'm already operating in some specific areas, we've got maintenance staff, we've got cleaners. They all know that we're looking for properties. And from time to time, you might got maybe the guy that comes in to service the boilers. He'll say, I've got a friend who's selling their house. Would you be interested? And we can get leads and contacts like that just through the general networking. So different ways of buying and different finance options for buying. So we can buy cash purchase. Cash doesn't mean to say that we have to have physically the the £10 notes. It just means that we're paying without using borrowing. Bridging loan. We're generally talking about bridging loan for the BRRR strategy because when we're doing significant renovation, that means that the house at the point that we buy it, it's not suitable for renting. So we can't go directly into what we call a term loan, so a long-term loan on the property. We need to use bridging, which is typically 12-month loan with the aim of completing work, repaying the bridging loan and switching to a standard long-term loan. And then there's this one I put here, pooled investment. That's where a number of people come together, generally with an experienced investor who are putting the money in to be able to get the deal over the line. So we're on to the second R, and we've got 15 minutes left. So the second R is renovating. So without going into much detail, there's quite a bit of work involved here as well, which is getting quotes, understanding who you're going to have to do the work. And we've typically got two possibilities. Either we're going for a main contractor who is looking after everything. It's going to be more expensive because that main contractor also is doing the project management. But if it's a good, reputable contractor that's got good references, maybe references from other investors who have used that contractor, at least it gives a good level of assurance that things will be done on time and on budget, or to save some potentially some money to use individual trades and separate project management. And if you've got the time to do that, go and spend a couple of months on site and project manage the work. But it's all a question of how much time you want to spend specifically on the project. So we've got the renovation. Obviously, a lot of things that we can say on renovation and details on how to find the right people and manage them. A few things to pay attention to on renovations. Even if it's a standard buy-to-let, we do have fire safety and other regulatory requirements. So make sure that you know them and that you're following them. Planning will apply if we're changing the use. So we're going to be doing HMO. That means change of use. Therefore, it's either planning or in some areas, it can be permitted development. Changing a house into a small HMO, if it's in England and it's not a Article 4 area, that's permitted development. If it's in Wales or in England in a Article 4 area, then it's full planning is required for that. Full planning doesn't mean to say not go for it. Just be aware that there's going to be time for dealing with the planning. Building regulations apply, are independent from planning. If you're adding an ensuite, That theoretically means building regulations and building regulations approval. And then licensing and regulatory requirements. Some areas have mandatory licensing. Quite a few boroughs, for example, in London, even on standard buy-to-lets, require the landlord to be licensed. Across Wales, all landlords must be licensed and must also be licensed themselves as an agent or using a licensed agent. And if it's an Article 4 area in England, we're doing an HMO, then we have to get the license for it. And that is independent from the planning. So some things to pay attention to on renovation. Renting, so that's next step is getting the income from the property. So we can do it self-managed. That means we're looking after the tenants. We're taking the phone calls at 10 o'clock in the evening when the toilet is blocked or something like that. Or we're having it managed by an agent. Obviously, there's costs associated, typically 8 to 10% if it's a standard buy-to-let, between 12 and 15% if it's an HMO. But again, it depends on what our appetite is or what your appetite is for spending time looking after tenants and yeah, the amount of money coming in. And to consider specifically in the case of if you're starting out and it's your first buy-to-let or second one, it generally makes sense to take rental income insurance, which covers a tenant who stops paying the rent. It covers the paying that rent instead of the tenant, and also the costs with evicting that tenant for whatever reason. So we've got the rent part. Now we come on, should we just go back to the rent part? Are there any questions on the renovation or the rent part?
If you're so you converted a standard terrace to from a 2 to a 4 by splitting the reception room by adding 2 rooms, do you still need to apply for planning for a change of use to C3 to C4, or would it be classed as still a single let residence?
If you're, yeah, that's a good question. So if you're going to be renting out individual rooms, then it is a change of use from C3 to C4. And in Wales, that is full planning. In England, it's either permitted development, so just declaration, unless it's Article 4, in which case it's full planning. If, however, it's changing, making a 2-bedroom house into a 3-bedroom house, but it's still C3, so residential house, then planning isn't needed for that. If it's a flat that you're converting from 2 bedrooms into 3 bedrooms, or 1 bedroom into 2 bedroom, which actually is quite a common strategy in and around London, it requires freeholder consent because the flat is going to be leasehold. And as the leaseholder of a flat, you can't just decide, well, you can, but it's not exactly legal. You can't just decide I'm going to put a stud wall in there and make my 1 bed into a 2 bed. You have to get the approval from the freeholder to do that work, and the right procedures to deal with that. Any other questions on the renovation or rent side?
Sorry, just to clarify. So in Wales, for example, if it's a single let 3 bed, I'm splitting the reception rooms to make it a 4 bed. But I'm going to be putting different individuals in those rooms. Would that be now applying for new planning to be covered as a HMO?
Yes, that is planning C3 to C4.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, sorry.
And in Wales is for planning. We don't have permitted development for that.
Okay.
Doesn't necessarily mean make it difficult.
Yeah.
Quite often in a lot of areas in Wales, local councils, because they're elected, are going, and whenever there's an HMO application, the residents are going to complain, thinking that there's going to be all sorts of strange people in there.
Mm.
So there's complaints. The local councillors who should be making the planning decisions sometimes, or in some cases, often will refuse the application, but there's no logical reason for the applications to be refused. And when it goes to, obviously, you need to take it to appeal, which is not a big deal. Some people are thinking, what a problem. My application has been refused. If I have to appeal, it's going to be really bad, etc. That's not the case. Because when something goes to appeal, it's in a different area. The appeal is judged not on the basis of, it's not judged by people that have been elected to some local council. It's impartial. And
Yeah.
generally, especially if there's an HMO policy for the specific area and the planning respects that policy. For example, if the policy states that generally there's a need for individual accommodation, and if the policy says we don't want there to be more than 10 HMOs in a specific area, and there's a calculation to do that, as long as the new application meets those rules, goes to appeal, it's most likely going to be accepted.
And how long is that period, do you think, from purchasing, if we was making it into a HMO, and assume it would go to appeal, because I would assume probably most of the time it does.
We're probably talking about something like 6 months.
Mm.
That doesn't preclude, in other words, that doesn't prevent us from getting on with the work,
Mm.
because putting fire doors in, making everything like ready for HMO,
Mm.
in the worst case, it's refused on appeal, which is very, very unlikely if it meets the rules. You've still got a nice family house, and instead of like cheap cardboard doors, you've got nice solid fire doors. It's fine. It's not really a big deal.
Yeah,
It's
no, makes
only
sense.
if, for example, you're gonna got a really large house and you're gonna make it into a 6 ensuite bedroom HMO, which can't then easily be like sort of converted back to a family home. You
Yeah.
have to think carefully about whether you're going to do that, and generally you want to get get it approved. And
Is it?
sometimes on things like that, like we've got a couple of deals like that underway at the moment. And what our plan there is do a very light renovation and get the house or the property cash flowing in as serviced accommodation, whilst we're applying for the full planning for 6 or 7 or 8 bedroom HMO. And in the worst case, we won't have the full amount of income. We won't get all the money out based on an HMO valuation, but we've still got a property that's cash flowing, and we can decide just to sell it on or keep it.
Mm. Yeah. Is it possible to find out the policies in the area if it would to go to appeal before you even apply for planning? Or is it a case of
Yeah,
how?
when you're buying something, you'll generally should look on the planning uh, look for the policy in that specific area and find it and look at it, or ask a planning consultant.
Mm.
Generally, I'll be doing both. I'll be asking ChatGPT to find me the HMO specific planning policy, because ChatGPT will find it in 30 seconds as opposed to previously 20 minutes digging around on Google.
Yeah.
And then yeah, picking up the phone and speaking with a couple of local planning consultants to get a feel for things. You've basically spent 10-15 minutes due diligence, and after that 10-15 minutes you're thinking, yes, this is a good deal for an HMO, and then obviously you're going to do the figures, look on spare rooms at what the room rate's going to be, etc., and make a decision based on that.
Yeah.
Because what we're teaching is do good due diligence, but don't take ages to do it, and get on and make a decision and do something, basically. So to get on and do something, we're going to take 5 minutes to finish the remaining slides. Refinance. So the aim is to get 75% of the expected end valuation, use good recommended broker, and we can obviously recommend certain brokers. There's going to be a valuation, so make sure the property is in perfect condition for the valuation. For the valuation, be present when the valuer is coming, but don't pretend that we know his job better than him and tell him this is what he must give. But just like be normal and point out some of the key values to be able to get the best valuation. And the point that I already mentioned, most lenders require the property to be owned for 6 months before the refinance. Then repeat. So all or most of the money out and be ready to buy the next property, remembering that it takes 2 to 3 months to find and buy the next property. So prepare well in advance to keep the momentum going. Do proper calculations. So here we've got a full list of things that need to be taken into account when doing the figures, and we've got templates that we use for that. We're going to be finishing on time because we've gone after that, and I think you all have the link because it was sent via the WhatsApp group. We've got a little started what I call deal clinic. Well, we'll be looking at different deals, and the one that I'm going to be running through is some figures on a BRRRR deal, and there you'll get a little idea of the different things that we need to take into account. So I'm not going to read through all this, but we can see all these things. Sometimes you'll get these so-called like deal sources are like putting out a 5-line headline on different posts saying purchase price, income, cash flow. But if you actually dig a bit deeper and start looking at the figures, you'll find that if you take into account all these things, is it a good deal or not, is questionable, and you need to find that out. Case study, we'll look at case studies on the next Zoom, so on the call that's going to start in a couple of minutes. And is there one last question?
All good on my end, thank you.
Trevor, I just had a really quick question. I don't want to take up. Oh, sorry, my cover's on.
That's
there we
fine,
go.
yeah.
I don't want to take up too much time because obviously you're going on the other call. But just briefly, you mentioned that most lenders will want 6 months of ownership before allowing refinance. Is that generally any lender, or is that a specific lender that you have to say to your broker, I want to refinance this within 6 months?
Yeah, in reality, it's going to be something like 90% of lenders will have that rule and 10% will allow. So if you're specifically thinking, and often 6 months is fine anyway, because by the time you get everything sorted out, got it nicely furnished, ready for evaluation, you're almost at 6 months. So in most cases, we're generally recommended to do it at 6 months because that gives a much larger panel of lenders. And the ones that will do it faster are likely in any case to have the slightly higher interest rates or arrangement fees because they know it's like a specific, they're like the only ones doing it.
Yeah,
if you've got a real reason that, for example, you've got something where you can wrap up the renovation in 2 months and you maybe put all your money in there and you want to get it out because you've got another project ready to start immediately after, like on 3 months down the line, then yeah, go for it and with the broker see which is the lenders that will do that.
I see. And I take it even with the 6-month ones, you go straight onto a variable deal rather than any fixed term, because a fixed term is obviously going to be for that term, right?
Sorry, when we go to refinance, we're always, so after the 6 months, we're looking at what we call a term loan, which is like your loan for 10 or 20 years, interest only. And that loan can have, generally, we were looking like for a 2 or a 5-year fix on that loan. So we've got like for the refinance, we've got a 75% loan to value loan. The lending is going to be for 10, 20 or 30 years. And the first 2 or 5 years of that period are going to be at a fixed interest rate. And then generally what we do is after those 2 years or 5 years, we go back to the lender and say, can you give us another fixed rate? Or
Yeah.
because after a fixed rate, there's no longer any early repayment fees. So you can switch.
Yeah.
When you switch to
On
do
the-
it, you've still got arrangement fees and stuff, but
Yeah, sorry. On the refinance, what I'm saying is the initial loan that you're taking just for the 6-month period, that's like you just get a variable deal, I assume, with no
that's
fixed
going to be
period.
typically bridging finance.
Oh, so it'd actually be bridging that you would take
Yes.
initially, not a mortgage that then for 6 months you then do
Normally,
something
you
else.
have to go for bridging if you've got generally if it's a BRRRR, you've got a lot of renovation.
Mm.
And so you can't take a term loan because it's not immediately rentable.
Right.
There are cases where if it doesn't need much work, if it's a light refurbishment, then you can if it's a light refurbishment, you can go for a term loan at the beginning. But the problem then with the term loan at the beginning, you're going to have early repayment charges if you want to get out of that loan after 6 months or 9 months. But even so, having said that, because I think, Adam, you're aware of this deal that we're doing in Ewell in Surrey, which is an HMO conversion. However, because it's a listed building, we're likely to end up spending a lot of time getting the planning. Because the property is virtually ready to use as is, we're looking at getting lending on a serviced accommodation basis. So we're looking at getting a term loan from the outset, knowing that in reality, once when we're ready, when we've got the planning for the HMO, we're going to go back to the lender and say, look, we'd like to convert it. Will you allow us to convert it under the same lending, for example? So there are exceptions where it does make sense to go for a term at the beginning, because a bridge is a bridge, and you can't just say, I'd like to extend my bridge, please.
Yeah, yeah. And they're more expensive, of course. But
That's
yeah,
right, yes.
okay. No problem. Thank you, Trevor. I'll let you go to the next
Yeah,
to the
thank
next
you.
meeting.
And you're all welcome to join the next one as well, which is on the group chat.
Yeah, okay.
I think you need to add me to that, Trevor, but thank you.
All right, okay.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
Bye.
take
Thanks,
care.
Trevor.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.